Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for tuning in for our third in a series of talks for this year's Open House London. My name is Dean, and I'm joined here by my colleague Christopher, who's tuning in from Mykonos. And together with the team behind We Design Homes, we recently launched We Design Homes as a platform to connect enthusiastic homeowners such as yourselves with some of the best architects across the UK and Ireland. So if you're looking to refurbish, extend, or even build your own home, please get in touch with us and we can help you out in those first steps. Christopher.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dean. My name's Chris. I am actually, as Dean said, I'm on holidays. I'm in Mykonos in the Greek islands, so it's a couple of minutes after 8 o'clock here. But thank you all very much for joining us this evening to hear what Fred's got to say. I just wanted to quickly tell you about why we've decided to put this series together. Our ambitions. Oh, Fred, the cat's invaded.
He's very excited.
Fantastic. Our ambitions are threefold, really, to promote, first of all, We Design Homes. As Dean said, our ambition is to connect the best residential architects in Britain and Ireland with those clients who'd like to be engaged and informed and know what they're in for. Obviously, also, we want to promote 4 really good practices across the course of this series. Last week, we've already spoken to Nimtim and Cousins. We've got Fred Gutfield this evening and Neil DeSheko on Thursday. And thirdly, there's an educational element to all of this. We really want to, particularly if you're thinking of building your own home or extending your own home, renovating your own home, and you're interested in a design-led approach, we want to help you understand what it's all about. So that's part of what we're here. I'm very interested to have already read a Q&A message from Neil. He's apparently drunk already. So Neil, I don't feel so bad. I am on holidays and I'm drinking Greek beer, and I'll throw you back to Dean.
Thank you. You've opened up the floodgates now. So yeah, without further ado, we're really pleased to welcome Fred Gutfield from Guttfield Architecture. Fred's practice is based in Berkshire and is known for creating contemporary homes, particularly designed around challenging, protected and sensitive sites. So welcome, Fred.
Hi there. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks to Dean and Chris. I'm just going to share my screen and I hope that it all works. Let me just make sure this is happening. Can everyone see the slides okay? Is it all working?
Oh, we can see all your notes as well, Fred.
Oh dear. Hold on. Bit of a slight issue here. Where is it connected? Hold on. Not very professional.
That's all right. If anyone's got any questions in the meantime, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. We will scatter a few questions throughout the conversation, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end for any dying questions that people
Apologies about this.
Jeffrey's asked if there's any recordings. Yeah, we've recorded all of our webinars. We'll look to publish them next week, so keep an eye on our website for that. If you are registered, which you obviously are, we will be issuing those out next week, hopefully, after a few rounds of editing. So we'll keep you posted. Thanks,
How are we
Jeff.
doing now, everyone? Is this better?
This is perfect.
Fred, yeah, we've got it.
Good. Right, I'll I'll crack on then. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Fred from Guttfield Architecture. Set up Guttfield Architecture about 10 years ago. We're a small practice. We design only homes. We started designing homes in London, and we're now based out in the Thames Valley, so we do homes sort of out here as well as in town. I want to talk to you about this project, which is Hackney Backhouse, and my screens aren't moving. Here we go. That's it. And this is a new build 3-bed house built in a conservation area in Stoke Newington in Hackney. The reason I want to talk to you about this project is because I thought some of you are likely to be considering some sort of major refurbishment or maybe even a new build, and our client Mary might provide a bit of inspiration for you. She went through such a sort of long and arduous process before we were involved, and I'm going to tell you about that, but I thought she might be bit of inspiration and really a bit of a role model for you as you go through the process. The site is a sort of fairly typical back garden site in London. So you have the sort of frontage house on the main road, and then you have the side road which goes alongside the garden of the frontage house. So the site in this case is the area, obviously the highlighted area. The frontage house is on the left, and the back garden is the site. In this case, the site is very small. It's only 11 meters side to side and 8 meters back to front. And the site, the front elevation faces sort of roughly southeast. When we first visited the site and met our potential client Mary, we had to sort of battle our way through lots of undergrowth to find down the bottom of the garden. At that stage, there was a sort of a rundown sort of workshop and garage structure. And at this meeting, Mary started to explain some of the very sort of long and difficult history she had with the site. And initially her aim, she owned the frontage house on the left of this image. Originally her aim was to, I think, really sort of sell the bottom of her garden with planning permission as really as a development. So back in 1999, she applied for, I think, quite a traditional new build house on the scheme, on the site. That was refused. She then appealed that, and the appeal was refused too. She then left it a few years to see what happened, and she started to notice some more, I guess, more contemporary sort of back garden schemes happening around Hackney, especially in conservation areas, and sensed that maybe there had been a bit of a change in attitude from the planners. So then thought about finding another firm of architects, again, not us, someone else, to develop some new schemes for the site. So this is a 2-story plus basement scheme that was submitted. Unfortunately, that was refused. Then they developed that scheme by taking a story off, and so this was a 1-story plus basement scheme that was submitted, and unfortunately that was also refused. So
what year are we at now, Fred? How long into the process is this?
I think we are probably, from memory, certainly post 2005. So between 2005 and 2010, that kind of era. So she, understandably was, I think, losing faith really at this point. But the interesting thing about Mary is she has training. She hasn't worked but has training as a barrister. And in the end, she decided to take this scheme herself and write the grounds for appeal and appeal it. And she was quite lucky in that they were able to get a site visit with the guy for the appeals service, and eventually the appeal was successful. So she found herself kind of finally with planning permission for a dwelling for the bottom of her garden, but there were several issues with the scheme that after sort of consideration she felt would be problematic. The main reservation was how the building looked from the street. There were problems with the internal layout, and also it had been such a long time since 1999 that her circumstances had changed, and she now wanted this house to be specifically for her and her husband to move into as a sort of downsizing exercise. So the design needed to be changed to suit her circumstances. So this is when Mary got us involved and asked us to look at whether we could effectively redesign the scheme. But she was incredibly nervous because obviously any sort of redesign of the scheme would mean going back to Hackney, and Hackney had previously refused probably 4 or 5 applications on the site. She kind of was very nervous about going back to them. For us, we could see it was really tricky because we could see a client who wanted to do something really interesting. It was a really interesting site, and the opportunity to sort of build a new build in a conservation area was quite exciting for us. But we're also a small practice, so we don't take on a lot of work. We do a couple of projects a year and take our time with them. And we thought, is this is this something, can we help here? Can we, is there enough scope to effectively sort of design Mary out of this hole that she was in? So we decided we probably could, but agreed with Mary that we would carry out a feasibility study. So we would look at the existing permission in detail, analyse the design, see what needed to be changed, what could be changed, and then put in a sort of pre-app with Hackney, get some pre-application advice, and find out what their response was. So we did that. We went through the design. We identified some of the things that she did, the appearance from the outside, slightly muddled front elevation, things like that. But we also identified some issues with the potential structural approach. Some of the ideas around budget that she'd been given were not really realistic. So we had quite a few issues that we needed to work with Mary to get to understand, what was possible on this little site. However, the main problem we had with this house was how it related to the street. We felt that this house had been almost entirely hidden away behind a wall. It really only gathered light from above, from roof lights and from light wells. And although this is, great in terms of preserving privacy, it also means that you've got very, very little outlook, because obviously the rear elevation faces onto a garden, so there's no windows there. The side elevation faces onto a garden, her back garden, so there's no windows there, and obviously the other end is up against a building. So the front of this house is the only opportunity to have any form of outlook, really, apart from into a small internal courtyard. So we really felt that this wasn't the right approach, and it was quite disconnecting from the street. And we really wanted to change that relationship. And talking to Mary, she agreed, and I think it struck a note that that's what had felt strange about the design to her, is that it was quite isolated.
Was you surprised it got through planning on that basis, Fred?
I think that she was almost kind of like punch drunk, I imagine. But talking to her, by that stage, I think she was just sort of going with the flow and wasn't being too critical about the designs that were going in. Yeah. And I think she's learned a huge amount through this process, sort of trial and error, really, in who she's been working with, but also how she's worked with them, and being vocal about her opinions, and having someone that she can kind of have that relationship with. I think it was previously it was a sort of, here's the design type conversation, whereas we like it to be, obviously different to that. So this is the plan we started to develop, and we were, like I say, we wanted to reverse the relationship here, and how could we stop this house being divorced from its context, from its neighbourhood? And so on the right hand side here at the front of the plan, you can see there's a courtyard. This is at ground floor level, and this is how you access the house from the street. So you go in, and then there's the front door in front of you. To the left hand side, in the slightly darker grey, you've got a light well that brings light down to the basement. So previously this zone would have been behind a wall, so it wouldn't have had any outlook to the street at all. So really our first sort of major move was to change the wall to be something else, and our setting off point was that it would be some sort of screen that would allow a direct relationship between the street and the house. There was a bit of a dialogue in that the house became part of the street and the street became part of the house. So skipping on, obviously, so I'll take you through the whole thing, but this is the design that we put forward for pre-application to Hackney. So obviously we'd addressed lots of the issues, all the issues internally with the layout, structure, talking to Mary about the budget, all that kind of stuff. But the sort of device to allow this relationship between the house and the street was a vertical screen, a screen of vertical louvers, effectively, with the access gate and an area with more opening, etc. So we also, at this point, because of Mary, the history of the site, and obviously Mary being quite nervous about going to Hackney, we were very, very selective about what we changed with the scheme. So we didn't want to change anything unnecessarily. We really wanted to talk to Hackney only about things that needed to be changed. So it wasn't a wholesale redesign for redesign's sake. So we had to be quite analytical about what we could keep and what we couldn't. And specifically, we kept to the same volume, we kept to the same footprint, we didn't increase the height. They were some key sort of constraints that we had when redesigning the house. So we put it in for pre-app. Luckily, the design officer was very supportive, thought it was a great improvement, and he became quite a helpful adversary for the scheme sort of throughout. So we were able to pretty quickly turn it into a planning application. And in this case, we did something called a Section 73 application, which is, and this is a bit technical, but it effectively allows you to swap out the drawings for the previous planning permission. Mm-hmm. And it's basically just a slightly more straightforward way of us getting planning permission for this new scheme. And so finally, 17 years after first applying for planning permission, Mary now had planning permission for a house that she would want to build and would want to live in. So she tasked us with getting on with the technical drawings and all the rest that's involved in something as complicated as a basement house. So
actually, just while I've got you there, a good question's come from our audience. John Curran has asked, was there continuity with a single planning consultant? Indeed, was there a planning consultant? Did you work with someone?
No, we didn't. Generally on the schemes we work on, single house schemes, we're quite knowledgeable on planning. We don't often use planning consultants. We have a very friendly planning consultant who we kind of, talk to, let's say, informally. In fact, we're doing his house now at the moment in the Cotswolds. But we on something like this, I don't think you would always need a planning consultant for something like this, personally.
Yeah.
So just a quick, a little movie. This is a model we produced and used during the design stage just to allow us to design this screen quite carefully, because obviously the spacing of the fins, this kind of privacy openness relationship was quite important. So the spacing of the fins, how deep they were, all those kind of factors were very important in just getting that relationship right, because we obviously want, the house needed to be livable and to not feel like you were too open to the street. And I just want to talk to you now in a little more detail about the process of constructing these louvered screens, mainly because, alongside all the other things, basement construction, the normal, the day-to-day stuff, this was a really fun process. And for us as architects, it's really nice when we get an opportunity to get our hands dirty. We're detailed people, and we love getting into the one-to-one and physically sort of helping to make something a reality. So the other thing is, because of the way this thing had been designed, it was a very precise structure. The structure had to be very light, so there were very important things that we couldn't have columns and posts and things ruining the appearance of it, because it was all about the visual and the view through. So it therefore had the potential to be extremely expensive, this structure. So especially if we'd have basically taken the planning level drawings, maybe added a bit of detail, but essentially handed them over to a fabricator and asked them to take full responsibility for everything. So quite often now architects are quite happy to just hand stuff over and let a sort of fabricator take responsibility for the detailing, the drawings, and also the delivery and the installation. We didn't want to do that because we thought it would add, exponentially to the cost, and also we quite enjoy this kind of thing. So we worked hand in hand with a fabricator, and exploring something in 3D like this in quite a precise way allowed us to sort of bypass a lot of the additional work that they would have had to do. So I'm not going to labour the point on these drawings, but we were able to sort of identify each piece of this component independently, draw it independently, number them all. You know, we could get into the detail of the letterbox, the handle, the numbering. There's a cycle store there. Each piece was numbered, ready for fabrication. We were able to produce these cut drawings, which are a digital file that could be sent straight to the manufacturer's laser cutter to cut out the bits of metal that would all then slot together. And we designed it like a Meccano set so that it could all be lifted into place fairly simply on site. So that's at the point at which we then sent these files across, and then this is the outcome. They collect their kit of parts. You can see all the slots there ready to receive the louvers at the right angle, all that kind of thing. It's quite fun as an architect being able to do this kind of thing, because you can really get into the detail, and you can draw and it become a reality. And also gives you the advantage as the fabricator then to weld and assemble under workshop conditions and know that everything's absolutely bang on perfect. So this is one of the pieces ready to go onto the back of the lorry. And on the right hand side, you can sort of see the concealed pin joints that we developed to allow the pieces to slot together, but only if they were craned in the right order. Another of the pieces ready to go. This is the corner piece. You'll see that later. The detail here of the fins. We introduced a kink into the fins, not only to sort of stiffen them up, but also it creates quite a nice visual effect as you walk past. It gives you a kind of twisting. Although they're not moving, they appear to as you walk past, and that's just from the little kink. And again, we discovered that from playing around with the 3D model. So here it all is loaded up, ready to go on the back of the lorry. And then the crane on the back of the lorry being used to crane it into position. And here's the first piece of the puzzle going in. And we've got some concealed steel work coming from behind the brickwork there, which slots into the piece and allows it to be fixed on. I'm just going to rattle through these pieces being craned into position. This one on the corner went in quite nicely. A bit of brute force was needed. And then finally, at the end of a long day, this is the final piece going in. So I want to talk a little bit about why we've used Core 10 as the finish, as a material for this. It wasn't a preconceived idea that we wanted to do something out of Core 10, but we needed this thing to be constructed from steel because of what it was doing structurally. We knew it would be craned into position, and possibly crowbarred as well. So we knew it was going to get bashed around. So therefore, it couldn't have a pre-finish. It had to be something that was finished on site. Then you're into sort of spray painting or whatever on site, and at that point, Core 10 really comes into its own because it's a self-sealing, basically oxidization process. So you can just leave it to weather naturally. And it takes roughly 6 months to come to a sort of quite nice color, and then it continues on for a bit longer. So here's a detail of the door number and the letterbox starting to go. I think that was a couple of weeks after installation, and then that's kind of 6 months later. So a few gratuitous shots of the patina. You can see the really nice surface finish you get. And I think these two, this and the next image, really show quite nicely the effect of this privacy screen in terms of the privacy inside the house and the relationship with the street. Here it is. You know, from most angles, you don't get any view through at all. But then there's a very particular angle where you can get that view in. I think what's interesting is as a pedestrian, you can walk past and you can look in. And you can stop and stare in if you want to, but crucially, the spacing of the louvers meant that as a car or a bike went past, you just can't see in. The louvers are just too close together, and that you just can't make out the image behind.
Fred, did Mary take much convincing, both with the materials and the way in which the relationship was with the street, or?
Yeah, so the 3D model was crucial, really, to be able to show Mary where, you know, you can see the figures in the background here. Where would be visible, where would you be visible from, and obviously that was done in conjunction with the planning planning out the house, the layout of the house, and we got it to a point where we thought it was about right. There's all little moves, like even introducing the kink into the fin, had quite a significant impact on the view through. But obviously, you know, 3D modelling is only so much. There was a definite kind of unknown quality to how this would actually be in reality. But actually, it has been pretty close to how we imagined it to be with the 3D modelling.
What about the use of Core 10?
The Core 10?
It's not a material that most homeowners are used to seeing. So did it take much convincing for Mary?
No, well, interestingly, I said earlier that she'd had a period of going away and she actually got quite into design and was seeing these other houses cropping up in London and some in Hackney. And I think around that time she started to, I think she saw a couple of things with Core 10. Now, she hadn't mentioned that to us, but when we proposed Core 10 as a finish for this thing, it was an open goal. She loved it. So it was.
You had 21 years to get used to the idea.
We were concerned it might be a bit of a tough sell, but she was completely, you know, aside from the practical reasons, aesthetically she was really keen on it as well. So no, that was we were really pleased with that.
I bet
so then I want to talk about how this kind of manifests itself internally. So this photo is taken from a very particular point in the kitchen, where you start to understand how the screen allows the outside environment to become part of the internal life and space of the house. So we're very interested in sort of bringing environment into architecture, and here the street, the vehicles, people walking past, the weather, the lighting outside are all brought into the house, and that's quite an important thing for us, as well as the sort of social aspect of understanding of visibility and this house not hiding itself behind a wall, passers-by understanding what there is there, and therefore it feeling sort of more part of the community, more part of the neighbourhood. It's not something hidden behind a wall that frankly could be anywhere. So again, it's also important to us that on this house in particular, that the external materials we use kind of became part of the interior approach for the house. So the Core 10 and the ochre brickwork, we used a fair bit of floor to ceiling glazing that allowed those materials to really be experienced as almost part of the interiors. And that richness, that external richness, meant that we could use quite a sort of restrained palette of materials internally. So you can see there's lots of white surfaces, there's some oak joinery, and some concrete floor tiles, but quite a simple restrained palette internally, so that you enjoy the sort of richness and the variety externally. Here you can see some of the, some full height glazing and the light wells either side. There's a small light well on the left and a larger light well on the right hand side, and they really again become part of the interiors. So the ground floor is largely designed as one open plan area. The street is on the left hand side of this image, and you've got the large light well on the left. So you've got a sort of independent sort of living room area on the left hand side of the small light well, and a small dining area on the right hand side. In between those is the small light well, which backs onto Mary's old back garden, and so there's a sort of smaller privacy screen there. That means there's no visual relationship between the house and the garden. And also we've got roof lights in the corners of the plans, corner of the plan either side to bring light down right away from the street as well. There's me sat on the sofa, enjoying the light from one of the roof lights. And really just a few photos of the interiors just to show the internal palette material. So very simple, white joinery, white worktops, white splashback, oak kitchen units, and some concrete floor tiles. Here's the little dining area, enjoying the light from above and also the ventilation from the small light well. And this is a small light well from below that also brings light and air down into the basement. And this is the larger light well. So you can see this faces out onto the street and has the large screen along the street that we talked about earlier. And because it's roughly south facing this space, it does enjoy really good daylight, and it doesn't feel like a basement space. It doesn't feel like a sort of classic London light well. It really is quite nice. And then the bedrooms that come off that light well, then enjoy a similar, they don't really feel like basement bedrooms. And if you get it right in a basement, you can make it feel like decent accommodation. Just here you can see the little ship stair that we designed. That allows escape from the basement of the house up to street level in the event of a fire. So just very quickly, we've got the main staircase down from the ground floor down to the basement. So we wanted to have a bit of fun here structurally. So we've got no stringers. There's no hidden steel work behind plaster. This is simply fabricated and screwed onto the wall, and the wall is thickened out with plywood behind the plaster. But a lot of these kind of gravity defying staircases are basically just hidden, have lots of hidden steelwork. This doesn't have any. And we used a brass handrail because it would start off really nice and shiny, but eventually end up weathering quite nicely down to this colour, which we thought would work very nicely with the Corten. So I'm just going to do some gratuitous shots of the end and show it in context. It's quite a lot of work for just a small little modest house in a conservation area.
It does settle in quite nicely to its surroundings, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that the Corten sort of matches. There is some red detailing on the brickwork of these houses. The ochre brickwork fits in quite nicely. It's always nice to add a bit of green with the roof rather than seeing horrible sort of grey surfaces.
Yeah.
And we were able to sneak in some photovoltaic panels as well to help with the sustainability of the house. So I just want to very quickly, in case any of you are thinking of doing a basement, just very quickly fly through some site photos just to help you understand what's involved, because I think a lot of people maybe might not appreciate the work involved in doing a basement, and therefore where the additional costs come from, because they are significantly more expensive than sort of normal above ground construction. So this is the site without the old garage and workshop on. So you've got to first visualize the space you've got, and you've then got to imagine digging a great big hole there, and that effectively everything around just wants to fall in. So we've got at the back of that photo, that's the neighbouring houses. Obviously we're going to be digging below their foundations, so that whole wall's going to want to collapse. So the first thing you have to do is underpin their wall. So that means digging out and creating a concrete foundation for their wall. You then can start digging away, removing the spoil. Even another thing to think about, some of you might be thinking about a basement under an existing house. So this is a relatively difficult site, but so much easier than basements we've done under existing houses. So think about the practicalities of machinery, digs, getting rid of spoil, all that kind of thing. So you can see what a tight site this was, and the fact that on this site we were building right up to the boundary on all four sides. So we didn't have any space to play with in terms of, you know, site setup, or everything had to kept on being moving around the site as we dug and removed. And let me just flick through. Then you start to create this concrete box, and the concrete is being pushed by earth all the time. So you've got to continually prop this concrete to stop it, to allow it to cure and become strong. So it's all, you know, it's a tricky process, and this is I think a lot of people don't appreciate the work that's involved in this, and the poor contractors down in the dirt doing this day in, day out.
How long did that process take?
Well, so that's the thing. We spent a year building this house, and I think 7.5 months of that, you're probably that's probably at about 7.5, 8 months.
Wow.
So the groundworks are, you know, they're incredibly slow, and that's what, and it you know, it takes time and it's expensive. So you form a concrete box, and then once that's, you can start to see some of the outlines here of the light wells starting to appear. And then once you've got the concrete box, you have to line it, waterproof it, because you've got water hitting that concrete from the outside. That all needs to go somewhere. That all needs to be pumped away. You're most likely going to be below the level of the sewers as well down there. So if you've got bathrooms or utilities down there, the wastewater from those appliances and loos and things, that's going to need to be pumped back up as well. So it's you know, it's an expensive way of working.
Yeah.
And since we've started doing projects outside of London, you don't really find that the land prices really support, you know, justify this kind of work. So then once you've got the concrete box, you're basically into sort of more normal construction. So on this, we did a very lightweight steel frame, and then infilled it with timber, and then the brickwork is non-structural. It's just a skin on the outside, and then the flat roof goes on before the sedum, and that's I think that's where I'm going to leave it.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Thank you, Fred.
That's all right.
That's brilliant. Just while Dean is having a look at some questions from the floor, I'd like to ask you one myself, Fred. You know, you in your practice, you've got a reputation for working with difficult and challenging sites, such as Mary's site here. I know it's not all you do, but what is the first, how do you approach a really challenging site? What's your thinking when you get started?
So our approach to all projects is to go in with a completely blank mind. It's to effectively, you know, not start designing for as long as possible. So I find if you go with a preconceived idea of a design before you really understand the site or the client, that's not likely to be the best solution, the most efficient solution for that site. If you try and impose an idea on a site, that's going to be an expensive way to go. So we will really hold off. We won't do, you know, sketches for the first meeting or anything like that. You know, that's really not how we work at all. So we don't have a grand idea. We often get clients at the first meeting sort of saying, "So what do you think?" And we have to say, "I have no idea. I have no idea."
At least you're honest.
Our process is about understanding the site, the constraints, you know, where's the drainage, you know, all that kind of stuff. What do you want? All those things. And only when we've done a really detailed kind of analysis of everything can we start to sort of problem solve and come up with solutions to solve those problems. So we're a really, you know, really constraints-based way of designing. On the occasion that we have an idea early on, a preconceived idea where we think, oh, that might be nice. Every time when you start drawing it, it will unravel itself. Yeah. It's really sort of try and be as naive and as empty-headed as possible. That's how we approached it.
I'll quote you on that.
Do those constraints inspire your creativity?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this is probably quite a common thing for architects, especially, you know, let's say you start a practice while you're working for another practice. So you start doing small, you know, you might do a loft extension or a small extension on a really tricky small site. So when you're starting, every millimeter sort of counts. And if that's where your sort of business starts, rather than, I don't know, doing big competition entries or grand schemes, that becomes the way you practice as an architect. So we're always inspired by, you know, a constraint, and that forcing us to design in a certain way and have a certain response. Yeah. And we're starting to get, you know, we thought the move out, we're out, you know, like I said, out in the Thames Valley now. So we're starting to get some, let's say, bigger schemes now in different kind of sites. And you can see some of them, these are all things that we've got on site at the moment on the screen now. And we thought, how's that going to affect our way of designing? Because presumably these are going to be less constrained, but actually they're just different constraints. So we're finding we can still design okay. So no.
That's good. Okay, we've got some good questions on the floor. Yeah, some practical questions regarding the fins.
Yeah.
Michael Smarts asked, were the fins welded or secured in another way?
They were welded, so they kind of fit together. You know, we used the laser cutting to do joints like that, but then welded, and you can get core 10 wire for a welding machine. So as long as you use the right welding sticks, it will weather very, very similarly to the rest of the core 10.
Okay, and was there any considerations given to the residue that comes off of core 10 dripping onto the site and street?
Yeah, so this was actually something that the planners were quite interested in. They didn't want the residue running out over the pavement, so we detailed a little, almost like a little V joint in the paving under the core 10 just to catch the residue as it drips off. Some of it still did get out onto the street, to be honest, but there's you can get solvent for the rust to clean it off. There's a bottle of that on site, and as the sort of layer, the oxidization sort of matures, should we say, the runoff is much less.
Okay, awesome.
There's a couple of related questions here, so I'll join them up. Was there any communication with the neighbour of the adjoining property, and how did the fact that she was a local support her party wall negotiations?
Yeah, so obviously, you know, the question there's referred to the party wall process. So because you're digging deep, you're going down, you basically have to do party wall awards with all relevant neighbours. So we had 2 adjoining owners in this case, the one that, you know, so it was all done fully through, you know, through the party wall process. And I would always expect something like this to be agreed fully with an award. So, you know, you've got to protect your neighbours' interests. So, you know, the way that process works is there's a series of agreed details for how you're going to join onto their building or how you're going to insert a foundation under their building. And that is negotiated between your party wall surveyor and their party wall surveyor, and becomes part of a legal agreement with your neighbours that you're not going to damage their house, and everything is going to be put right at the end if you know, if there's any movement or anything like that. And that is standard with a basement project in London.
Awesome, thank you.
And was the fact that she'd been there for quite a while help with the neighbours? Did she know the neighbours well, or?
Honestly, in this case, no. I don't think there was a particularly friendly relationship, and so it was just done properly through the party wall, you know, through the party wall process.
And then Claudia's asked, how does the cleaning of the light tunnel glass work?
The light.
Who cleans the windows? This is the question we always get.
How are they cleaned? Everyone wants to know how the glass is cleaned.
So the light wells are just cleaned from the bottom of the light well with a squidgy on a pole.
They're not self-cleaning or anything like that.
No, they've got the roof lights and things have self-cleaning coating on. No, but it's just like how you would if you stand at the bottom of the light well. Yeah. It's just like how would you clean a first floor window?
They're all accessible in that way, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And the roof, obviously, the roof has a man-safe system on because although it's only 1 story, it's a 2-story fall to the basement. Yeah. So if you were to go on the roof and fall off, it could be dangerous. So
brilliant. Yeah. And then the last question, Chris, do you want to take this one on the?
From Lee Pfeiffer or Pfeffer. I apologise if I've mispronounced your surname, Lee. Beautiful project. Congratulations. Thank you for sharing this detailed process. Can you, Fred, share percentage of project costs for the basement structure reinforcing for this project?
That is a tricky question. Not off the top of my head, no. I would say that it was very. It was. No, do you know what? I can't.
There you go, Lee. If you've got Fred an email, I'm sure we'll be able to get back to you on that one.
But it did vary hugely when we went to tender.
Okay.
So we had a huge range of tender responses on this project, and a lot of the variation I remember was due to how people had priced the structural elements of it, specifically the concrete box. I could look it up, but if you contact me separately, I can look it up for you and send it to you privately.
Perfect. There you go, Lee.
We encourage you to do that, please.
Yeah.
Actually, Fred, someone has also asked, were the builders any good? My guess is they were really good.
They were excellent. So I've worked with that company several times. Weirdly, so I studied at the Bartlett at UCL, and one of the guys I studied with, his father was a builder, and so he owned the company Tolina, who did the building work. I've done probably 5 or 6 projects with Tolina now. They're really good. They're very practical, and always come out sort of favourably in the tender process as well. So yeah, they were really excellent, and they're experts in basements. They do a lot of basement work.
Fantastic. Good plug too.
Yeah, nice one. Squeezed it in at the end.
Always plug the builders. They're good people.
Very good.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Fred. Give him a little round of applause.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
And if anyone's got any questions or any other topics, that they want covered, feel free to get in touch with us or get in touch with Fred directly. His details are on the bottom of the screen. So hopefully we'll see you for the next one on Thursday. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good evening. Take care.
Bye-bye.